Chapter 8, Exposure 2-3. Chapter 6, Exposure 2-3, 1992, 1993. Percy is 16 and 29, Harry is 12, Snape is 32, Ginny is 11, Tom is 16, and Lucius Malfoy is feeling a bit reckless. The Weasleys stick together the next couple of days. The entire school buzzes about the chamber, exchanging notes, reading passages from Hogwarts, a history, talking about Slytherin's feud, and even buying and selling amulets. It really ought to be Henry's job to prevent the young Gryffindors from spending their money on dangerous artifacts. But alas, it falls to Percy to confiscate several noxious necklaces from Neville when one explodes at lunch. Percy marches him to the library and points to the section on shielding charms, and adds, as an aside, that he ought to make copies of the book for the rest of the house to read. Ron and his friends are snooping, as usual. Percy catches them coming out of Myrtle's bathroom one day, whispering together. "If you're going to interrogate Myrtle, I hope you did so respectfully," he says archly. The three of them start as one. "Did she tell you something?" Ron says eagerly. "She just cried for us." Percy rolls his eyes. "Don't let me see you three back here unless you have a legitimate reason," he says, shooing them away. Myrtle is indeed crying. Percy unwards his desk and chair and sits down, eyeing her thoughtfully. "You weren't here that night, were you?" She sniffles but seems to collect herself. "No," she responds, voice thick with tears. "I was with Anthony." "Why here?" Percy says to himself thoughtfully, moaning Myrtle's bathroom, not exactly the most auspicious area of the castle for Tom Riddle's Horcrux to haunt. Then an idea. "Myrtle, where exactly did you die?" "Here," she says, and lifts a trembling hand. "Right over there. That's where I saw the eyes." Percy leaves her to her sobs and goes over to examine the sink, tracing his finger over the small silver snakes that adorn the handles. The thought that's been niggling at his brain the past couple of days finally coalesces. The basilisk needs some way to get around the school unseen. "How big are the pipes, Myrtle? How wide, would you say?" She stops crying almost entirely as she considers this. "I can stretch my body in some of them," she says thoughtfully. "Others I have to squeeze in." "Why?" Percy worries his lip as he thinks about it. "You know how I think what killed you was a basilisk," he says consideringly. His public stance is, of course, the opposite, but it does not take an expert researcher to determine that the intersection between the set of magical creatures that could conceivably live for over 1,000 years and animals rumored to be aligned with the Slytherin line is very small indeed. She nods. "I think it may be going through the pipes," he continues, absently playing with one of the faucets. "Perhaps in Myrtle's day there was an opening in the pipes in one of the walls, or the basilisk had been smaller. I think someone has let it out again." She inhales sharply. "But he's dead, isn't he? They don't have to clarify who he is." Percy looks at her squarely. "I'm not so sure he is." Asterisk Myrtle promises to spread the word to the ghosts, so they may keep an eye out for the basilisk. Meanwhile, Percy plots how he's going to steal the diary. On Saturday, he decides, during the Quidditch game. He's already asked Ron and Hermione to bring Ginny. On Friday, he gathers his courage and goes to his lesson with Snape. "What do you know?" Snape says as soon as he enters, not even bothering with the pretense of subtlety. Percy knows that Snape won't rip through his head and risk causing brain damage if he thinks he doesn't need to press that hard. In the meantime, Percy has done some thinking and concluded that the school needs to be prepared for a worst-case scenario. "I think it's a basilisk," he says, and meets Snape's gaze steadily. To his surprise, there's no intrusion into his mind. Snape stares at him, and there's a hint of panic in the man's normally inscrutable face. "Explain," Snape says, his voice flat. Percy sets down his bag. "As you know, I am friends with the ghost Myrtle." Snape nods impatiently, his hand gripping his wand tightly, as if he will be asked to charge off and defend the school instantly. Percy tries not to let Snape hurry him. He will have to be careful with what he says. Myrtle was killed 50 years ago, and the last thing she remembers is a large pair of yellow eyes. She was killed in a bathroom, the same bathroom she haunts now, and the same bathroom where Mrs. Norris was found dead. "Pipes," says Snape, whose powers of deduction are something to be feared. "Yes, I think so too," Percy confirms. Snape thinks for several long seconds. "I will need to inform the headmaster. Perhaps we could have roosters. And tell Pomona to cultivate her mandrake crop carefully." Snape continues thoughtfully, as if Percy isn't even there. Percy jumps when Snape's attention snaps back to him. "You will take over brewing for the infirmary," he orders him briskly. "I need to research the petrification draft." "You think I'm right?" Percy asks in some amazement. Snape looks at him sourly. "Loath as I am to say it, I believe you may be, Mr. Weasley. Have you any theories to who may be behind these acts?" The Dark Lord hangs between them as if suspended on a rope. "Only what we have discussed before, sir," Percy manages. "Quite," says Snape, and that is all that is said on the matter. Percy is not proud of how he gets Ginny's diary. The injunction against boys entering the girls' dormitory is a surprisingly effective deterrent. Percy cannot get beyond the slide that the stairs turn to under his male feet. He tries to levitate himself through on a very wobbly levitation charm, but he is unable to sustain it for more than a half-second. The corridor is too small to fly through, and likely warded against that possibility. Mimsy refuses to steal another student's possession for him. Myrtle cannot be trusted with the transport of an entire book, and Percy cannot think of a single female friend who would fetch his younger sister's diary for him. And so, feeling unaccountably nervous, he points his wand to a second-year girl in the common room and casts a silent imperio. After a tense silence, during which Dumbledore fails to barge through the door, Percy proceeds. The girl's mind is soft and pliant, and he makes a note to learn legilimency in addition to occlumency. He gets strange wisps of her memory and personality as he commands her silently to go into Ginny's dorm and search for the diary. If he concentrates, it's almost as if he can see through her eyes. He's not proud of his actions, but there is something fascinating about the imperious curse. He'd read about it. At one point, it was not considered unforgivable. It had been developed to use on animals, of all things, and then corrupted for use on humans. It was widely considered to be the most humane of the unforgivable curses, the most common, and the easiest to cast. It somehow manages to superimpose someone's will or another person, often without them realizing. One could give the person an instruction once and have them continue to act on it for months without needing to maintain the curse the entire time. Instructions can be vague, and the victim retains enough of their mind to continue to solve basic problems such as walking upstairs or unlocking doors. The girl manages to find the diary. Percy knows his sister well enough to know where she might hide things. There isn't much privacy in a dorm room. The diary is under her mattress beneath where her head would be. He instructs the girl to leave it at the foot of the stairs. He whispers an obliviate and leaves her blinking in confusion next to her friends, trying not to think about the ease with which the spell flowed through his wand. The diary looks innocuous. Brown leather with faded gold trim. Masculine, but the edges are soft, the pages creamy. It looks like the type of notebook his mother would fish out of the second-hand bin for Ginny, or even for George, who has a notebook collection to rival their sister's. Ginny wouldn't have questioned it in her cauldron. After the humiliation of the day, she would have assumed it was a gift, maybe for starting her first year at Hogwarts, that had slipped everyone's mind. Percy traces the cover with his wand. A standard detection spell reveals nothing, neither does the more advanced variant that he had developed. Frustratingly, the diary does not show up on the Marauder's map, though the shade of riddle that had possessed Quirrell had. Did that imply something about the diary? Was it weaker, perhaps, or less active? Percy tries every flavor of hominum revelio he can create, but none indicate that what sits in front of him is a Horcrux. Could he be wrong? He shivers slightly. If he is correct about this, and despite the map, the neatly inked Tom M. Riddle in the front cover suggests he is. This is the Dark Lord's very first Horcrux, created via the murder of Percy's best friend. It's a piece of his soul. Percy takes a deep breath and turns to the first page. He knows Ginny wrote in it, and that somehow provides Tom with the strength he needs to control her. If Tom controls him, it would be unthinkable. But he has to write in it. He has to charm Tom into revealing the truth of the other Horcruxes. But he has to do so without surrendering his own soul. He's a nearly adult wizard, he counsels himself. In another world, he's almost 30. He's not a 12-year-old witch. At the very least, he's the same physical age as Tom had been when he'd created the diary. He has to not reveal too much of himself. He feels as if he knows this instinctively. Soul magic relies on the soft exploitation of self-knowledge or on utter dominion. Given what he observed with Ginny, Tom was not dominating her. He was slyly and insidiously controlling her, exerting more influence day by day. With a steady hand that betrays none of his hesitation, Percy dips his eagle quill into the vial of his very best ink and writes, Thursday, November 12, 1992. Transfiguration, 2 feet, the first recorded human transformation. Charms, practice the vanishing charm, practical Monday. Potions, 13 inches on the properties of Elk's horn, perhaps as a congealing agent. When Percy lifts his quill, Tom writes back. Percy smiles grimly. It had a suspicion that incorrect potions theory would awaken the beast within. You're thinking of bison horn, I'm afraid. Elk has rather different properties. Percy counts to 200 slowly in his head. A student would be shocked or frightened, not excited. Hello, is somebody there? The words seep away, to be replaced with my apologies for startling you. My name is Tom Riddle, and this is my notebook. Why would Tom introduce himself with his true name, rather than an alias? He barely has time to wonder before the answer hits him. Pride, of course, of the flavor that oft goeth before the fall. I'm sorry. I found it in a corridor. What house are you in? I can return it. I was in Slytherin many years ago. I animated this book with my memories when I graduated, but I left it behind in Hogwarts, I think. I'm afraid I did it incorrectly. Whatever you write in ink is lost to fuel my response, so students often move on to sturdier tools. A pause. Unless you'd like to talk, of course. Oh, he's good. Percy thinks he would have responded to this had he been less cautious. Diary Tom has probably inferred that Percy is a 5th or 6th year, given the topics of his assignments. The way he's writing is friendly and non-threatening, invoking positive memories of Hogwarts, inventing an excuse for the book's discarding, and slyly inviting Percy to write back. Would Percy write back? Percy thinks of Landon, his boyish enthusiasm, his conviction that with the powers of magic, he could fix any problem he may encounter. He'd write, How did you capture your memories in a book? I'm afraid I don't recall the process. It was a variation of a pensive, I believe. I remember up until I purchased the book, and the rest is blank. I think I must have enchanted it. I'm hoping one day I'll figure it out again. If the victim's first question is how, it's a good guess that he would respond favorably to this bait. Tom neatly suggests a wild goose chase through pensive magic, a fascinating and diverse branch of little-known sorcery. Through the inevitable discussions, Tom would slowly extend his claws. Percy's fine with a brief segue into pensive magic. He has to avoid as many personal questions as possible. After 6 years of hiding his status as a time traveler, he can claim competency at this particular skill. You must have been very talented, he writes envyingly. Tom's reply is both smug and condescending. Yes. Percy doesn't manage to write more in the book that night. It turns out that somebody curses a bludger to attack Harry, and the excitement of him losing the bones in his arm due to Lockhart's blunder takes up much of the evening. Percy can't imagine who would be targeting Harry. It can't be Tom. He can't be powerful enough yet to be exerting that much influence. Ron claims it's Snape, but this sort of assault isn't Snape's style. Enchanting a bludger is quite tricky, too. It's unlikely that Draco, Ron's second choice, would be capable of such advanced magic. He puts it out of his mind for now. Harry has no shortage of enemies. Any reasonably competent 5th year could probably figure out how to enchant a bludger. He thinks instead of Tom, of what he is going to say to him when he next speaks to him. Percy has decided that to be safe, he will only write to Tom immediately before his lessons with either McGonagall or Snape. That way, if Tom tries to possess him, one of them will come looking. He spends much of the night thinking of Tom. What Tom knows about Percy. 6th year Ravenclaw, first name Ignatius. Blood status. Half-blood, my father was a Muggle-born. A few siblings were not particularly close. Pureblood mother, she's not very fond of me, I think. Absent father, always busy, but to be honest, I've never known with what. Precocious, charms and transfiguration tutelage and smart, 11 owls, mostly arse. What Percy knows about Tom, 6th year Slytherin, first name Tom, last name Riddle, blood status unknown. No siblings, parents unknown. Smart, of course, and arrogant, sentimental for Hogwarts, sarcastic and witty. What Percy wants Tom to learn about him, resentful of his peers, thirsting to prove himself, smarter than he first appears. A little lonely, only a follower to a worthy leader. Someone who could feasibly be a good right-hand man, someone with a mind but could be led. Someone who would resist possession. He proceeds slowly. November 1992, Harry, Ron, and Hermione think the heir of Slytherin is Draco Malfoy. Percy watches Draco, who is enjoying preening under the attention, and yet again reminds himself to tell Tonks to take the boy under her fierce wing. He's never able to write to her. He keeps forgetting until it's too late to head out to the owlery. You know, the real heir of Slytherin would not want everyone to know who he was until the opportune moment. Percy cannot help but comment to Draco when he passes him one day. It's a bit foolish to take on his enemies without any of his power, isn't it? This cows Draco a little, but does not prevent Ron from his irrational hatred. First Snape, now Draco. Percy thinks some of it may have to do with their generation's status as the Victory Boom class. Of the Weasleys, only Ron and Ginny had been born into peace. Perhaps that was why they launched themselves so recklessly into the war when the time came. Percy does not remember the war from his childhood, but he can remember a vague sense that his parents were tired and stressed the entire time, a sense of lurking danger, like the Dementor under the bed was everywhere. Ron's peers are all born right after peace, to parents who still eye each other with mistrust if they run into each other in Diagon Alley. It's ironic, really, that they would fight for something they cannot uphold. Percy goes to a study group twice a month, and it's headed jointly by a Slytherin and a Gryffindor, albeit two pureblood girls who were close friends prior to Hogwarts. He's close friends with a Ravenclaw. In Ron's year, those sorts of relationships are far less likely to occur and become even increasingly less likely as the war begins to build again. Perhaps because their parents went to Hogwarts during the partisanship of the last war. It bears further thought. Regardless, Percy does not shy away from patiently explaining to Ron yet again that he should cultivate a friendship with Draco, not destroy it. Professor McGonagall has exempted Percy from the homework on self-transfiguration. To a point. He thinks with some resignation of the scrolls he neatly completed over the summer. Instead, she's challenging him to find a research thesis, something he could use to apply to one of the more prestigious wizarding universities. He's torn. Oh, how he'd love the chance to study in the exalted halls of one of those institutions. But he must stick to the timeline. He must position himself to be close to the minister. He's so impossibly close on his animagus transformation. He's grown comfortable with the idea of himself as a lynx, small, lithe, cautious, vicious. But the idea of taking that final mental leap, of abandoning his humanity for the small white figure, scares him in a way he cannot entirely verbalize. You cannot have control over everything, she says at the conclusion of yet another failed session. Her voice is heavy and disappointed. There may be mistakes. That is why I am here to supervise. But you must take that leap of faith, Percy. You must trust your magic to be your anchor. He says nothing. Trust is magic. That's about all he trusts these days. Maybe what he does not trust is himself. Trust your magic. Something about the self-transformation exercises we complete in class are unsettling, Percy admits, leaning back in his bed. He isn't as stupid as to reveal he's studying for the animagus transformation, but he needs to talk this through with someone. Tom's reply is thoughtful. What are you unsettled by? The potential for mistakes. The loss of control. Percy thinks this through. Magic can set right nearly anything he may do to harm himself, particularly if McGonagall is watching him carefully. Perhaps the loss of control, but he is in control the entire time. The uncertainty, he finally replies. I do not know what it feels like or what to expect. In the moment, it will be new to me. Tom seems to enjoy these moments of teaching where he can have authority over a boy his own age. Idly, Percy wonders if Tom thinks of himself as 16 or 50. Perhaps it's similar to how Percy feels, caught between ages. It will be only one moment of uncertainty, the diary counsels. And then you will have access to self-knowledge, to power even. You're right, Tom, Percy writes back, and he means it. Now to flatter. How did you learn so much magic so quickly? I am talented at many things, Ignatius. If we can ever get me out of this diary, I'll have to show you. Percy grins despite himself. He is realizing that Tom, while sharp, is predictable. He wants Percy to help him get out of the diary, and he'll say what he needs to say to make that a reality. I look forward to it. The first dueling club of the year is a mixed bag. Percy enjoys tremendously the look of dark amusement on Snape's face as he blasts Lockhart into the far wall. The other members of his defense study group catch each other's eyes and grin. It's possibly the only time Percy has ever exchanged a smile with a Slytherin, with the possible exception of Draco Malfoy. Draco is as pale and pointy as ever, and he quickly turns what could have been an amusing evening into something entirely different. Except Percy looks at Snape, who alone looks unruffled at the news that Harry Potter is a Parselmouth. Snape had told Draco to set a snake on Harry. Why? How could Harry even be a Parselmouth anyway? Percy had honestly forgotten about this little episode from the first timeline, and as he silently listens to his classmates chattering away about the surprise after the club concludes, something about the episode bothers him. Percy does not believe that tripe about all Parselmouths being dark wizards, but he does think it likely that the gift passed itself down through the Slytherin line. Parselmouth, like other innate magical abilities, is likely hereditary. Tonks, for instance, can trace her morphing ability through the Black Line. But Percy had researched the Potter family quite extensively, and he hadn't seen any ties to Slytherin. So why would Harry have this gift? Percy could have missed something. Of course, as he'd told Hermione, nobody was quite sure how the lines of each founder developed to the present day. But the Gaunts claimed they were descendants of Slytherin, and that Tom opened the chamber 50 years ago seems to corroborate their claim. Try as he might, Percy can't find a way to connect the Gaunt line with the Potters, and even though he thinks it's likely inconsequential that Harry can talk to snakes, it still bothers him immensely. Tom, did you ever have a dueling club? I was never one for organized sport, I must admit. Percy huffs a laugh. Ours is run by an absolute buffoon, Professor Lockhart. He knows more hair spells than dueling spells, I'd imagine. Who is the headmaster? Albus Dumbledore. I've never met him, though. I don't think he's at the school very often. I know Dumbledore. He was the Transfiguration professor once. I'm afraid he does not like me very much. Percy thinks about how to respond. It's probably because you're a Slytherin, he writes. I've noticed that he has a preference for the Gryffindors. Percy feels something like a scoff in his head. Typical, Tom writes, somehow conveying a haughty drawl in the loops of his LS. I admit I'm not his biggest supporter, Percy continues. I don't particularly get the impression he cares very much about the school. It seems like he just wants the position for some sort of power. He does, Tom replies. Everyone is blinded to his naked ambition. But I always knew. He would sacrifice a student in a heartbeat if it allowed him to achieve his goals. Percy agrees with this. The body count at the end of each war is evidence enough. When one is a Hogwarts student, it feels entirely natural that battles should be fought in classrooms and dormitories. The castle is one's entire life from 11 to 17. Of course Death Eaters would break in. Of course monsters would roam. Of course peers would fall. Where else would be the center of attention? Aging out of Hogwarts, however, provided Percy with quite another perspective. One war was being fought in the Ministry, arguably where the war should be fought, in still hallways and silent trials and crowded cells. Another was being fought in the countryside and in towns between snatchers and those fleeing a terrible fate. That too Percy can understand. Every Dark Lord relies on fear and respect, and in order to elevate the Death Eaters above the rest, there needed to be a lesser class of thugs, still ostentatiously on the same side as those in masks and cloaks, but rough enough to give Tom's preferred followers a sense of satisfaction. But why would any of that war have to creep insidiously through the hallowed halls of Hogwarts? Dark wizards and light wizards alike looked back on their years at school with fondness. Percy can't imagine, based on how fondly Tom speaks of Hogwarts, that he wanted to destroy the school, shape it to his own image, perhaps, but nothing more. There was no need for Hogwarts to become a battleground. There was no need for Dumbledore's army to induct a new generation of child soldiers. Part of me wants Dumbledore to notice me, Percy admits to Tom, but part of me knows that his attention will bring nothing but hardship. Something that Slytherins know is the value of being underestimated, Tom writes back slyly. I hate being underestimated, Percy complains, whines even. He says it to make Tom laugh, but he also says it because it's true, even through 2 lifetimes. Tom's instructions appear in a firm script. You must use the time you are unseen to become great. Tom is many things, undeniably cruel, mocking, arrogant, but Percy can admit that he is truly great, or at least he becomes so. Certainly one of their time's greatest wizards. It seems unfair that Harry must be the one to destroy him. Harry is not particularly great. He's strong of heart and loyal and determined, all of the things that heroes ought to be. Percy quite likes Harry in this timeline now that he's spent more time with him, but he's realized that despite it all, Harry is just a boy like any other. Meanwhile, Tom understands things about magic that it takes Percy days to struggle through. He can still help Percy with his essays, even when it is the second time around that Percy is writing them, always ready with an extra comment or an interesting fact to enrich Percy's existing knowledge. He's invented his own spells. At 16, he discovered the secrets of Horcruxes and split his own soul. What chance did Harry have? How could he possibly hope to battle such a wizard as Tom? How did he have the courage or the foolishness to continue on when he was so plainly outclassed? What had Harry done at 16? What had Percy? Fresh off another purification ritual, Percy does not know how the map, either version of it, divines the password to the prefect's bathroom, but he certainly can admit it makes his task far easier. Percy pulls his hangings shut, as is his tradition, and pulls out the diary. He'd relaxed slightly the injunction that he should only speak to Tom before his lessons with either of his preferred professors. This version of Tom seems very far removed from the Dark Lord that Percy remembers with such horror. Percy finds to his surprise that for all of his misgivings about Tom, he actually enjoys talking to him, at least this teenaged version of him. This Tom is not yet a Dark Lord. This Tom is arrogant and cold and clearly aware of his own power, but also hungry for gossip and news and interesting facts that Percy can dig up for him in the library. This Tom knows 6 ways to jinx an annoying classmate and 3 separate secret passageways to cut down on the walk between arithmancy and herbology at opposite ends of the grounds. This Tom is smart and clever, and at times rather funny, equipped with a dry sarcasm that causes Percy to chuckle to himself out loud, more than once. Moreover, it seems to Percy, this Tom seems to like him back. Of course, he is on his guard for artifice, for false flattery, for insincere compliments. But Tom seems to be incapable of that sort of obsequiousness, at least to a junior wizard he believes to be so clearly his inferior. Percy finds the best way to communicate with Tom is a bit how he would communicate to Snape if Snape were aware that he and Percy were now approximately the same age. Percy is always polite, always interested, and always obliging. Do you think it is necessary to purify oneself after performing dark magic? Tom's answers are always immediate, as if his consciousness is awakened by the act of Percy putting his quill to the page. Have you been practicing dark magic? Only a little, writes Percy honestly. I know it's silly, but I'm a bit afraid of the effect that dark magic could have on me. It's hard to separate propaganda from theory in some of these books. Tom's reply, when it arrives, is clearly derisive. A strong wizard should never be afraid of any magic, Ignatius. Percy flushes at the rebuke and scribbles, well, I would say that taking reasonable precautions is never foolish. Reasonable, writes Tom, underlining it with a heavy hand. Is it reasonable to fear magic merely because it is new to you? All magic is about power, Ignatius, and dark magic more so than others. Light magic relies merely on cause and effect, but dark magic relies on magical strength, on willpower, on your ability to exert control over your magic. So when the books caution that performing dark magic can corrupt you before Percy can continue writing, Tom's script fills the page. To be corrupted by dark magic is to succumb to it, to allow it to control you rather than the opposite. If you are at risk of being corrupted by dark magic, you have no business practicing it. But how would you know you are strong enough to control it? Tom's reply takes longer this time, which gives Percy a second to calm his breathing. These conversations can agitate him, and he feels as though the same could be said for Tom, based on the velocity of his responses. Sometimes speaking to Tom can be dizzying. Percy has found that the best way to stall Tom is to distract him, either with a question, an interesting tangent, or even a joke. Not that Percy is particularly funny, he supposes, but Tom seems to like his wry observations, as long as they are not at Tom's expense, which Percy would never dare. An interesting question, Tom allows. Have you ever felt the strength of another wizard's magic? Dumbledore, perhaps, or one of your professors. Percy thinks about this, but all he can think about is the Dark Lord. During the one time that Percy had been close enough to him to feel his throat close as the Dark Lord's magic swelled to fill the halls of the Ministry. Once, I suppose. Have you learned to have an awareness of your own magic? During the animagus transformations, or his attempts at them, Percy has been learning to foster an awareness of his own magic, to feel it gathering over his skin, sitting in his core, and spreading through his veins. To both his and McGonagall's frustration, Percy does not struggle to visualize his magic, but rather to access it as a transformative force. Yes, try a similar exercise, but expand your awareness outward. You are aware of your surface-level magic. Yes, force it to stretch to the rest of the room to encounter the same type of magic on another. Percy frowns skeptically, but obeys Tom. He closes his eyes and breathes through his nose to center himself, turning his attention to the shimmer of magic that has clung to his skin since he can remember. For a second, he luxuriates it in, enjoying the smooth feeling of his magic buzzing over the soft hairs on his arms. Then, without a strong idea of how to force his magic elsewhere, he tries to push with his magic so that it peels away from him and floats throughout the room. It takes a few tries, but after a minute or two, Percy finds to his surprise that he succeeded. He has a sudden awareness of Alexander in the next bed, chatting softly through the hangings to Oliver. Percy's magic collides softly with Alexander's, and Alexander pauses for just a second, though he resumes relating his story to Oliver after only the barest hesitation. The collision of his magic with Alexander's, however, is enough to send shivers down Percy's spine. He feels Alexander's magic, suddenly, feels it vividly in a way that he's never encountered before with another wizard, feels his magic measuring itself against Alexander's, and feels his magic winning. Percy is stronger than Alexander, he suddenly realizes, though without a clear understanding of why that may be so. The buzz in the back of Percy's teeth subsides as Alexander's magic accepts Percy's dominance, and Percy finds to his astonishment that his magic seems to flex and spread over Alexander's body as well, as if Alexander's prone form were merely an extension of Percy's body. Keep practicing, advises Tom when Percy relates this to him a few minutes later. An experienced wizard will be able to sense such an obvious intrusion. The trick is to merely release enough of your magic to sense whether your power is greater than the other wizards. Indeed, Percy practices quite a lot over the next few weeks, extending his magic toward his classmates at supper, or in the common room, or most commonly in his dormitory bedroom at night. He finds this type of granular control over the direction of his magic to come quite naturally to him, and to his gratification, he finds also that his magic is stronger than nearly all of his peers. He does not risk the professors. Indeed, the thought of Snape catching him measuring himself against the man makes Percy want to shudder in embarrassment. Magic understands objective truth, says Tom once, after one of Percy's attempts. If you are a stronger wizard than another, your magical cause will recognize that fact. In this way, it is not arrogance for a strong wizard to attempt the dark arts. It is merely a natural extension of your will. Have you ever met anyone with a stronger magical core than you? Not often, Tom replies. Percy waits an interminable amount of time for a response, and just when he is about to shut the diary, Tom adds one more line. Dumbledore, I suppose. Percy hesitates, not knowing what to say. But I would hope that my future self, whoever he may be, remedied that situation in due time. Percy thinks again of the Dark Lord stalking furiously down the halls of the Ministry and shudders. I have no doubt that you did, he writes, entirely truthfully, and is more than a little relieved when Tom does not answer back. December 1992, Percy had told himself that it did not bother him to be passed up as prefect. He'd even asked Professor McGonagall about it, and she had crisply informed him that skill in magic did not guarantee one a position aimed at overseeing one's peers. I believe you would be competent at it, as you are at all things, she had said, raising a strict eyebrow so that the compliment did not fill him with as warm a glow as it could have. But you have never been a social leader in your house, Mr. Weasley, and I believe you have no interest in becoming one. It is true, to a point. He is not popular. If possible, He is even less popular in this timeline than he had been the first time. His tentative inroads with his housemates of his early years fell completely by the wayside as he began taking on more independent projects, and now he spends meaningful time merely with Landon and Myrtle. Landon is not a prefect either, but he seems supremely unbothered by the fact. His latest project is to create a permanent charm. Never mind that permanence is antithetical to the entire discipline of charms, and spends most of his time experimenting with various household charms to see if he can enchant them for perpetuity. Percy has a theory that Landon is so fascinated with charms because he is far too wealthy to ever see how mundane most charms really are. Enchanting knitting needles to produce a sweater or animating pans to wash themselves may seem interesting until they are necessary skills for those unfortunate enough not to have the means to own a house elf. Regardless, he is not bothered by the slight. Nevertheless, the sight of Henry with Percy's badge pinned gleaming to his chest awakens some monster in his chest that he is unable to suppress entirely. "It's not fair," he writes childishly, angrily. At one point, we all must learn that the rules we think govern fairness rarely do. Tom replies coolly. You can either continue to play by them or make your own game entirely. He polishes his badge every night. Tom suggests a dark jinx that will tarnish the badge until he casts the counterspell, and it takes every ounce of maturity in Percy to not immediately cast it. Careful, Perce, you'll burn his hair off, Fred says in his ear, sliding in beside him at the table. George, naturally, is not far behind. In fact, the entire Quidditch team troops in, each sweatier than the last. Harry is sporting a bruise that Percy eyes, but decides to let lie. Maybe whatever Harry is facing will toughen him up a bit. Merlin knows the wizarding world will need Harry to be tough. I see all of the showers were taken, responds Percy huffily. He makes a production out of casting a clean air charm, but Fred only grins easily at him. You'll always be perfect Prefect Percy to us, George coos. Percy pins him with his most damning glare, but it has little effect. Oliver actually grins conspiratorially at Percy, which is an odd feeling. Henry is a bit of a Burke with that thing, isn't he? Did you know he polishes it every night? Despite himself, Percy's lips twitch. That's what you think he's polishing, Fred retorts, waggling his eyebrows at Oliver to a general round of laughter. Harry goes red. He takes the opportunity to speak to Harry. Harry, I was wondering if you would be able to help me with something, he says. I'm interested in learning a bit more about Parseltongue. Would you be able to help me? The rest of the Quidditch team looks on, interested, as Harry flushes an even deeper red. While some of the students continue to be frightened by Harry, the team seems, as a whole, content with the idea that their 12-year-old Star Seeker is not the heir of Slytherin. Percy rather thinks Oliver would have become a Death Eater if the Dark Lord could catch a snitch. I don't know how much I can help, Harry says. To me, it's as if I'm speaking English. I can't actually tell if I'm speaking Parseltongue. Interesting. Percy retrieves the primer on Parseltongue that is in his bag and flips it open to the beginning exercises. So you can't read this. Harry peers at it, as do Fred, George, Oliver, and Angelina, crowding in a sweaty bunch over Percy's shoulder. Book has a number of notations to indicate different types of hisses that the capable reader is meant to reproduce through various tongue positions and guttural noises. No, Harry says. Is that meant to be a written version of Parseltongue? I'm not sure it can be written. Can you say some common phrases? Percy asks, producing the recording sphere he'd purchased at the beginning of the year. Only, I'm trying to compare them to the primer. George snorts. Only Percy would have a primer on Parseltongue. Trying to talk to snakes, are we? Fred chimes in with another eyebrow waggle. Percy ignores them and looks at Harry. I can't do it unless there's a snake, the other boy admits. Even more interesting, some kind of innate ability. Percy thinks for a second and then closes the book, pointing to the snake on the front. Is this sufficient? Harry looks at it and opens his mouth to speak, producing instead a hushed hiss. Percy smiles. Perfect. Percy realizes quickly, of course, that the voice that Harry heard that night was the basilisk. Hopefully, the basilisk has gone back to wherever it lives. He doesn't think that Tom is possessing him, given that all of his hours are carefully accounted for and nobody else has been petrified. Percy has to give Fred and George a stern talking to. No, it is not funny to pretend Harry is the heir of Slytherin, and yes, Ginny is upset by that kind of talk, so they could at the very least be mindful of their 11-year-old sister. That night, he risks bringing it up to Tom. Have you ever heard of the Chamber of Secrets, Tom? Tom's response seems cautious to Percy. Something in the way his words appear slowly, as if the diary is hesitating. Only rumors, why? I think someone tried to imitate opening the chamber earlier this year, Percy writes back. Nothing has happened since, but everyone still is talking about it. That happened during my time too. Do you know Rubeus Hagrid? He was expelled. Percy bites the fingernail at his thumb and then decides on Hagrid, the groundskeeper. Doubtful. The heir of Slytherin would be a powerful wizard, not a half-giant. Perhaps one of the pure blood students tried to pin it on him. I'm worried they're going to close Hogwarts. They won't. Dumbledore would rather die. They'll just arrest Hagrid. I can't go home. What is your home like? Percy thinks of the burrow. It's overflowing of rooms and clamour and noise. Lonely. You're not lonely at Hogwarts. I'm not particularly popular, true. But I do not know how anyone could be truly lonely at Hogwarts. There's so much more here. I know what you mean. What is your home like? Percy watches his words fade into the book. He's about to give up on a response when Tom's neat handwriting curls across the page. Demeaning. Your parents. Not worth the ink to write about them. It is no matter. I certainly am. I know it's an odd thing to admit to, but I've never liked the rhetoric around blood, insofar as blood must be your family. I hardly feel like I belong to my family. Why should they define who I am? I've always thought it's just a matter of magic, Tom replies. I think respect should come from magic, not blood. I agree. I want to be as powerful as I can. Then Percy does something that he hopes isn't tremendously stupid. I cast my first Imperius, just on a random second year. I wanted to see if I could do it. And could you? It was so much easier than I thought. The reply is slow, but when it comes, Percy smiles. Do you want to learn some more magic? Before he knows it, it's the end of the term. Neither Snape nor McGonagall have achieved their goals. He has not yet completed the portraiture of Potion, nor has he finished his animagus transformation. Regardless, he is pleased with his progress in both of their sessions. Percy plans to make the elixir for gold over the break, when everyone is gone. As for McGonagall, Percy told her that he is going to transform the next time they meet. Mistakes be damned. She'd laughed, but he'd meant it. He spends a few very enjoyable days in Myrtle's bathroom brewing the elixir. She assists him, enjoying the novelty of brewing again. Her bathroom is actually quite a good place to brew. Percy wonders absently if the trio is still trying to make polyjuice, and if so, where. He learns the answer to that question a few days later, when he escorts Hermione to the hospital wing, furry ears and all. He lied about which abandoned classroom he'd found her in, feeling a little guilty that he'd taken their spot. He'd snagged the rest of the polyjuice too. Hermione really was very brilliant. Tom, meanwhile, has given him quite a long list of spells and rituals to learn. He taught him a cleansing spell as well, the one he used at Hogwarts to mask signs of dark magic. Percy takes the list and masters it. Know thy enemy, he thinks to himself whenever he feels a frisson of doubt. Finally, it's time to use the elixir. Myrtle, Percy says seriously, warding the bathroom as fiercely as he can without causing an alarm. What I'm about to show you, you cannot tell a single soul. Are you loyal to Dumbledore? Myrtle wrinkles her nose. Why would I be? If he or any professor or any student now or in the future ever asks, or pries, or whatever, you must lie to them, do you understand? Her expression turns delighted. Are you finally telling me one of your secrets? He can't believe that he's doing this, but there's a small voice in his head that tells him that she deserves it. Yes. I'll never tell, not now, not ever, she promised solemnly. He pulls out the Philosopher's Stone. Myrtle wasn't a Ravenclaw for nothing. She puts together the clues quickly. That's what was in that last chamber, she says. You went without me. Yes, he admits, waiting quietly for her judgment. She flies at him, turning his insides to ice, her version of a friendly swat. You prat, why didn't you take me? I didn't mean to go, he says, half lying. I saw my brother and I followed him to make sure he would stay out of trouble. In the meantime, I found this and took it. You could be immortal, she breathes, looping around his head in lazy curls. You could stay here with me. He gives her a long and steady look and she dips her head. No, I guess not, she says sadly. You're looking, aren't you, for a way to free me? He hasn't been, and he feels a smidgen of guilt. Yes, he says anyway, mentally bumping up its priority on his to-do list. I'm working on it, Myrtle, I promise. She settles down comfortably. Well, at least you'll be rich. And rich he becomes. It is another of those memories he will cherish forever, one of those brushes with magic that leave the entire world glittering a little brighter, that make him stand a little straighter. This is magic of the type that fills his veins with innate power, that separates him from animals or muggles. This magic, the twist of petals sprinkled into the gleaming potion, the gentle and steady Latin incantation, the twist and pop of as the elixir coalesces, the blood-red gleam of the stone as he dips it into the elixir, is, in a way he cannot entirely articulate, holy. He will either need Aunt Muriel to take him to Gringotts, or he will have to wait until the 17th birthday to open his own account. Until then, he decides to store the gold in his second trunk, the one that Tom had personally guided him through warding against all detection. It's a comfort to him, knowing that he can make more money whenever he needs to. For the first time, he is grateful that the wizarding world continues to use real gold and silver for its coins. It will be very easy to deposit the gold into his account and withdraw galleons. He's not going to be stupid about it. At the very least, everyone knows that Weasleys are poor. He might be able to explain a new robe or a new cauldron on the largesse of Aunt Muriel, but he could hardly buy himself more than that. It matters not. The money is to fund books, supplies, not to have him compete with the Malfoys. But for the first time in what is perhaps his entire life, Percy feels a tension inside of him uncoil. He has never had enough money to feel secure. Not during his time being underpaid at the ministry, not during that year of peace after. Having that money tucked away feels exactly like he always imagined it would. Calming, like the feeling of knowing all of his homework is completed several days before it's due. If this is how Landon and Henry feel, no wonder they can walk around with such calm assurance. Now that he's felt this, he never wants to feel that anxiety of need ever again. I tried the identity ritual on my new trunk. I can't really test it, of course, but it glowed the precise shade of cerulean the book indicated, and the ritual accepted my offering of hair. I'm impressed with you, Ignatius. You're proving yourself. Of course I am, Percy writes back. Ignatius is arrogant in a studied, casual way, simultaneously needy for Tom's approval. Anyway, I reckon you're a good teacher. Percy hears the ghost of Tom's laugh in his ear. When I come back, you can be my right-hand man, Tom says teasingly. Merry Christmas, Tom, Percy writes back, unable to hide the wide grin of victory on his face. Do you want to see something, Ignatius? I've been working on it for you. A little Christmas gift. Percy hesitates, but curiosity drives him forward. Of course. Put your wand on the paper, Tom instructs. Percy sets up a glowing timer meant to ring in 30 minutes. He writes a note that says, if the timer is ringing, fetch Professor Snape. He takes a second to reassure himself. His occlumency shields are up. Then he turns and places his wand on the page. Tom is undeniably handsome. It's his first thought, sneaking in somewhere amidst the shock of being pulled directly into the pages of the diary. The swirls of color coalesce into Hogwarts from many years ago, the memory slightly toned sepia like an old photograph. They are in the corridor outside the Transfiguration classroom, or what will be the Transfiguration classroom in Percy's time. Tom is neatly dressed, wearing a green sweater, a collared shirt, and a black tie and trousers. He stands off to one side as a group of girls come down the corridor, their laughter jarring against the previous silence of the hall. The girls do not notice Tom or Percy. Percy grips his wand more tightly and looks at Tom, wondering if he can acknowledge him. Tom. He hears Tom's voice, cold and amused. It's a memory, it echoes in his head, and his voice is smooth like butter. I haven't yet figured out how to appear to you, but I thought this would do as well. Percy and Tom had looked into pensive magic together a few months ago. This is incredibly complicated magic, and once again Percy feels something like jealousy and awe simmer quietly in his stomach. Even a part of Tom's soul is capable of feats unheard of. This is incredible, he thinks. This is the first time I cast the Imperius, Tom reveals, and Percy inhales sharply. Something about the intimacy of Tom choosing this particular memory for Percy is jarring. If he ever needed proof that he is making progress with Tom, here it is. Tom's voice echoes around his head, narrating the memory. I was scared, he admits, and the vulnerability in his voice shocks Percy to the very core. I thought I might be detected, but I was like you, Ignatius. I needed to test the limits of my own power. I didn't know you had any limits. Tom laughs, and the sound is unlike anything Percy had imagined in his head while writing to Tom. Men like us seek to prove that is true. Tom has neatly combed dark hair, eyes that could kill, cheekbones that are high and imperious. Percy had seen him in photos, of course, but the limited selection had not captured his cold grace, the sinuous fluidity of his movements. He trails behind a girl, young and unknowing, quietly tracking her with his eyes. Just like Percy, he casts the spell silently. Percy can feel his pride and glee seep through the memory as the girl turns and begins walking the opposite way. Tom and Percy follow her all the way up to the astronomy tower, where she climbs over the railing and stands on the very edge. Her hair is loose and curling, her nose is long and straight, and she stares straight ahead unseeingly, unfazed by her proximity to her own death. Part of him wants to scream and warn her. Had Tom brought him here for him to witness his first murder? Was it a reminder that no matter how playful Tom could be, that he is already a killer? The other part of him is fascinated. Did she feel fear, standing on the edge beyond the railing? Could she process what was happening to her through the haze of the spell? Imperius gave the victim enough control to make common decisions. Would she be able to fight back if the order given meant certain death? I could have made her jump if I wanted to. Tom's voice appears in his head again, making him jump himself. How do you think it made me feel, Ignatius? He doesn't need to think to answer. He knows how it would make him feel. Like you are standing on the edge yourself, he thinks, watching the girl look over the railing. But you know that if you were to jump, you could fly. I was right to trust you, Tom thinks, and his cold and high laughter follows Percy out of the memory. He appears, gasping, in his room. His timer shows 9 minutes remaining, and he hastily cancels it and then shreds the note to find Snape. His heart is pounding wildly. He feels something like panic, something like elation, something like pride. Percy creeps open to the book and opens it to a blank page. Nothing. Tom never initiates, he only responds. Thank you, Percy writes. We have so much ahead of us, Ignatius, Tom responds, and Percy slams the book closed.